Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the Rustic Von Lodge, where the Robert E. Howard Show returns, where I'm going to be talking about this book, which is a book I mentioned in my last Robert E. Howard Show. This is Robert E. Howard, The Life and Times of a Texas Author by Willard M. Oliver, a new biography of Robert E. Howard, available now. I talked about this a week or two ago. I can't remember, actually, probably a little over a week ago. And I mentioned it in a video just because I wanted people to know that this was available. Because looking at it, it was sent to me, which was fantastic. Looking at it, I could tell that this was going to be something special. It looked like it was going to be the kind of biography that we really needed for Robert E. Howard. A well-researched, scholarly biography with notes. And it proved to be that. In fact, it exceeded my expectations. I read this book this week, and it was tremendous. It was everything I hoped it would be and more. Just a fantastic book by Willard M. Oliver, which should not surprise me. Oliver's written a lot, and he's written a lot about Robert E. Howard. And this is not his first biography. He also wrote August Vollmer, The Father of American Policing. And that is a book I've heard good things about. I haven't read it. Not yet, anyway. I probably will if I ever get my hands on a copy. But I've heard good things about it. And so Oliver spent a lot of time researching this book and writing this book. It is very well written and exceedingly well researched. Oliver has gone through all of the letters that Robert E. Howard wrote, the letters that were sent to Robert E. Howard, the correspondence that survives. And we also have records of interviews from people who knew Robert E. Howard. We have documents written by friends and people that knew Robert E. Howard. Other documents, other historical documents about Robert E. Howard and Robert E. Howard's family. Willard M. Oliver went through all of that stuff carefully. And he got probably the clearest picture of Robert E. Howard and his life and his times that I've come across. I've read some good books about Robert E. Howard. This is probably the most well-researched, and I think it's probably going to end up being the go-to biography for people interested in Robert E. Howard. Not only is it a scholarly work that if you're going to be writing about Robert E. Howard or researching his life, this book is going to be a necessary book to read, I think. But it's also a book that could be read by just anybody who's interested in this author because it's so well written. It gives such a great picture of Robert E. Howard and his life. And it's also profoundly moving. It is such a great portrait of Howard, a fellow who lived a tragic life. He did not live long. Died when he was 30 years old, killed by his own hand. And there have been a lot of theories and misconceptions surrounding the death of Robert E. Howard. This book handles all of that very well. In fact, I think, have a better understanding of why Robert E. Howard ended his own life than I ever did before. Because there were pressures in his life, physical exhaustion, other things going on that I never fully appreciated until I read this. It certainly gives a very clear picture about being a pulp writer in the 1920s and 1930s, which was not an easy gig. It did provide Robert E. Howard a lot of freedom, which was very, very important to him. And this book makes that very clear, just how important personal freedom was to Robert E. Howard, which he said many times. And writing was a way he could achieve that. He was enormously talented, as I've mentioned over and over again on the Robert E. Howard Show. Just an incredibly talented writer. No matter what he wrote, he put a little or a lot of himself into everything. Certainly he shines if you compare him to many pulp writers who were his contemporaries. But he's just a great writer, pulp writer or not. He's just a great writer. Much better than most people give him credit for, probably because of what he wrote. Because he wrote sword and sorcery stories and fantasies and horror stories. But he was enormously talented. And this book talks all about that. He was a bit of a genius, Robert E. Howard. Tremendously smart guy. But he had his problems, you know. This book does not try, like some other publications have, to psychoanalyze Robert E. Howard. But it doesn't shy away from his issues either. And it really was hard being a pulp writer at the time. It did afford him some freedom, but at the same time, it ended up being incredibly hard work. Because he had to write a ton, because not everything he wrote was accepted. He never knew whether a story was going to be published or whether it was going to be rejected. And so a lot of his stories were rejected, sometimes for really dopey reasons. And considering some of the stories that were rejected, who knows what the editors were thinking, because some really good stuff of Robert E. Howard's was rejected by pulp magazines. Some of them were published eventually on reconsideration, but still. But his work was very well received. The work that we are most familiar with for Robert E. Howard was published in Weird Tales. He was one of the big three of Weird Tales, along with H.P. Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith, two writers who he corresponded with quite a bit, especially H.P. Lovecraft. And H.P. Lovecraft was just devastated when Robert E. Howard died. And so we get a lot of information about that correspondence and those relationships in this book as well. A lot about Robert E. Howard's friends. He did have very good friends and very interesting relationships. Those are all chronicled in here in great detail. We learn about his family. Just how overworked he became, as I mentioned, because he had to work so hard. I mean, he was, towards the end of his life, physically exhausted. He went through periods where he was just exhausted from working so hard. He would type all night long. He would write for hours and hours and hours at a time. It's impressive, especially when you consider how much he was working, how much he produced in such a short time, and of what high quality that work was. It's astonishing, really. And like I said, this is a tremendous book, very moving book, and it's one I highly recommend if you're interested in Robert E. Howard. I couldn't recommend this book any higher than I do. I don't agree with all of Willard M. Oliver's conclusions regarding different things about Robert E. Howard in his life, but at the same time, I did not do all of this research. So what can I say? It's amazing. Highly recommend it. Buy this book if you're interested in Robert E. Howard or pulp writing or fantasy writing. Robert E. Howard, The Life and Times of a Texas Author by Willard M. Oliver. It's great. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.